Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Pluralsight Spotlight. I'm your host, Adam Gunn. If you're new to the series, welcome. Let me set the table for what you're going to learn today. Our Spotlight series is a chance to meet some of the incredible people that differentiate the Pluralsight platform. Our brand is built on the back of incredible course authors who bring the best of themselves to each and every course they create. It's my privilege to have as a guest today, Mike Woodring. Mike, welcome to the Spotlight.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to give the audience a little bit of background on you from your bio, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Mike Woodring was head of curriculum at Pluralsight, where he led the team that drove the vision and strategy for delivering world-class technical content. A former Microsoft C# MVP and multiple U.S. patent holder, Mike has over 30 years of experience developing high-performance software systems and for training developers around the world. Today, Mike is a technical advisor for codepath.org. Mike, welcome.
Thanks.
Mike, I've known you. Our time goes back.
Yeah.
Give the audience a little sense for your pre-Pluralsight journey into tech. Like, where did it start for you?
My journey into tech started young. I had a techie for a dad. My dad was an engineer for the Air Force. He was a physics guy. So we always had some kind of cutting edge electronic thing at the house, which back then would have been maybe a 4-function calculator. We had a big giant television in a console piece of furniture, and he had assembled the TV. So from a very early age, I was always around computer related things being either bought and used or taken apart and put together. So that's kind of where the technology spark started for me.
And did it continue into your, formal education?
It did. I originally thought, because of my fascination with taking things apart and putting them back together, I thought I would want to be an electrical engineer. So I started college as a declared electrical engineering major. I was fortunate enough that my standard college curriculum, this was at Virginia Tech, everybody, regardless of major, had to take a programming course. So for me, that first course was a course on Fortran. That was my first programming language. I had a lot of fun, and so the next semester I took a different programming course in a language called Pascal. And then the summer after my freshman year, I had an internship with a defense contractor, and there was this new hotness programming language called C, and I had to teach myself C. And by the end of that summer, I realized I shouldn't be a double E. I wanted to be a programmer. And so I switched to computer science, and kind of the rest is history.
Rest is history.
Yeah.
Take us into the, some of those early stops in your career. Like, what really, shaped you as you entered the workforce?
Yeah. Honestly, I would say the workforce itself shaped my college experience. I had that internship after my freshman year that I was fortunate to get, caused me to switch majors as a computer science student. I was fortunate to get involved in projects that were like research projects a professor would have going. And then I got another job while I was a junior in college. And so by the time I graduated with my undergraduate degree, I had written code for shipping software. So for me, that journey into tech started with just being interested. And then it really was, I think, fostered by having opportunities to try my hand at applying the trade of being a software developer in a real work environment. And that's what made school more interesting. It's probably what kept me in school. And from there, I just kind of kept following technology from little companies to big companies like Intel and on from there. So,
is there a particular project, a few guests we've had on Spotlight, remember like that first code they pushed to production or that first app they delivered? Is there anything in particular on your journey that you recall with fondness?
Well, I until you said the word fondness, the one that was coming to mind is a prominent memory. I would say it's sort of an anti-fondness memory, but it was very formative for me, which is, a software developer, you can do all kinds of work. Today you could be a back-end developer, a front-end developer, you could work on user interfaces. Well, I'm old enough that when I was working still as a student on production software, I was tasked with, at the time, working on a very, very early version of Windows. And in particular, I was building part of the user interface that was involved with moving an image around on screen, which back in the mid 90s, early 90s was quite a technological feat. And I had poured everything into this project. And I will never forget the day that my boss looked over my shoulder, and I was so proud. I was showing off this piece of work that you could take the mouse and grab the image and it would kind of crinkle, and then you could push it around the screen. And he said, "That should be blue." And I don't even remember what it was that wasn't blue that should have been blue, but it just deflated me. And I realized at that point, I probably don't want to be involved in user interface software development. And to this day, I don't. I am the last person that anybody should have involved in making a piece of software look good. Yeah, so very formative. But again, it steered me in a direction that I ended up having a lot of passion for, which for me was system software, under the hood, behind the scenes, device driver type work, distributed systems work. And I just was always like a kid in a playground in those spaces.
Okay. And again, I don't know if your bio articulated it very well, but you have a unique journey into Pluralsight and have several phases of, I'd say that Pluralsight journey. Give the audience a sense of how that began and where it's at now.
Yeah, my journey with Pluralsight started before Pluralsight was founded. The co-founders and I and several other people, we all had met while we were doing training through another company. At the time, I was an Intel software engineer, and then I had left Intel and hung out my shingle as a self-employed consultant. And I gained a lot of practice teaching courses to other programmers back then in the context of this was pre-video. So when Pluralsight was founded in 2004, I was around as one of the early contractors that was authoring content before Pluralsight even got into video. So we did slide decks, and we taught in rooms full of 20 computers and 20 students. And I was just sort of always involved in Pluralsight's journey from the beginning. Fast forward 8 years, I was convinced to join the team in 2012 on staff. And initially I joined as managing technical editor, and the company was maybe 15 people strong. And I literally had to watch every video that ever was published by Pluralsight. I had to decide if it was good enough to be published. And we didn't have means for doing things like vetting someone's ability to be a good author. We didn't have a process at that point for doing like structured quality assurance of the content an author did produce. So I was involved in the early days of creating all of that process to move encoding to the cloud, to figure out how to vet the authors, to figure out how to vet the content. And I just kept on with the company until I ended as head of curriculum by the time I left in 2020. So quite a journey. We had a ton of growth. I think 15 people to about 2,000 were the employee counts. Acquired several companies during that tenure. Obviously went public in 2018. So just I would say a recurring theme I used to say to Fritz all the time whenever he would say, "How you doing?" is I'd say, "Well, I'm not bored." Yeah. And that was as true the day I started as it was the day I left. So
yeah, you probably have as broad a perspective on the content quality at Pluralsight than maybe anyone, having literally lived it and watched all those courses in the early days. Like, as you look back and knowing that, you can argue that content is being commoditized, there's quantity over quality arguments, but like what would you say as you've looked at, what are you most proud about that differentiates content on the Pluralsight platform?
You're right. I mean, there's probably a lot I could say. It's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, because quality for so long was my responsibility. Maybe a thing people don't think about is Pluralsight has content that they have commissioned and paid for that they don't publish. So they don't just publish it because somebody did it. It has to meet a certain bar. Same thing was true with people who, when Pluralsight started to acquire some fame, we had a lot of people knocking down the door that wanted to be an author. And the quality of an author's ability to teach was always paramount. There's a lot of people that know things. The talent is in how do you figure out how to convey what you know to somebody who doesn't already know it in a way that's digestible, understandable, makes sense, is engaging and motivating. And those are sort of at the core of what Pluralsight did when it was founded in 2004. It was the core of what we did while I was on staff here, and I believe it to be true today. Now that I'm on the other side of the fence as just an author like everybody else trying to work on courses. I know there's somebody looking at it, and it's got to be good enough to go out the door.
I'm going off script here a little bit, but I had a impression as you were talking, like even today, so many people hold a Scott Allen course as like the benchmark of what they aspire to. And, you know, Scott's no longer with us. But like help the audience understand like what was the magic of a Scott Allen course, and what of that is still something that is findable on the Pluralsight platform, maybe through other voices.
Yeah. For me, the thing about Scott's his talent, for me in a nutshell, was making the complicated thing, whatever it was, as a learner, when you heard Scott explain it, your reaction was, well, of course that's how it works. He just had he always was able to find a way to take the complicated thing, the barrier to understanding, which would be a barrier to your ability to do your job for most people who are watching Pluralsight content. He was always able to figure out what's the thing that's in their way, and then explain it in a way that was engaging from the moment you felt motivated to pay attention to the actual explanation. And I just always felt like everything that I learned from watching Scott, whether that was in person back in the day or on video, my reaction to the complicated thing when Scott explained it was, oh, of course that's how it works, you know. And to have the chance to learn from a teacher like Scott saves you countless bumps and bruises and time to get to that level of understanding. So, and today you're right, there are a lot of authors that have that same ability, and that's what I look for. Oftentimes the most difficult thing to teach somebody is that first course on the topic, the introductory level setting piece of coverage, right? The advanced content, by the time you have a piece of advanced content, you have an author or a teacher who obviously is at an advanced level, but you also have an advanced learner. But the ability to take a learner who's brand new to the thing and hasn't seen it yet or interacted with it yet and make them go, oh, I get it. That's hard. And Pluralsight is rife with authors that can bring that to the table.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating kind of consistent theme as I've done these interviews, how much the authors really feel like that's the value that they bring, is consolidating what might take you on your own 10 hours and 5 different sources into something that, yeah, it might look like 3 hours when you look at the timestamp, but you know, they're saving you 15, 20 hours in doing what I think Scott Allen really, you know, pioneered and championed in those early days. And that still continues on the Pluralsight platform.
It is. And if I could take it one step further, I think the thing that was always true at Pluralsight, it was a core tenet that is still true today. And I'll make the gratuitous chat GTP or GPT analogy, is that the other thing that you get from teachers like Scott and others today at Pluralsight is you can trust that what they're telling you, it not only makes sense to you intuitively, but it's a truth. One of the bumps and bruises most learners experience in life is you're out there scouring the internet looking for, how do I do this thing? What does this thing mean? Why would I have to do it this way? And oftentimes you read something that makes sense, it's understandable, and you don't know it at the time. It's the wrong way to do it. It's bad advice. And you know, technologies today like ChatGPT are the same way. You know, it's so convincing, and sometimes it's so convincingly wrong. And training material can be exactly the same. It can be very convincingly wrong. So the trust in the quality of the author and their content is at the core of everything that Pluralsight authors are working on.
Yeah, we just recently published a video by Simon Allardyce where I think he, you know, kind of dives into that potential ChatGPT risk of, you know, reliability and trust. Transitioning to other things that get into learners' ways, we recently did a state of upskilling report Pluralsight has published, and the biggest barrier to learning, whether it's in an organization or whether it's through feedback from individuals, making time, finding time. I'm curious your perspective on why this concept of making time to learn is so challenging, and what advice you might have to overcome that obstacle.
Boy, that's a good question, and I don't know that I have a good answer. The thing that comes to mind for me as it relates to time is a saying I heard probably decades ago that I at the time thought, boy, that's nail on the head, and I think it's true today. And that it's kind of a quip, and the quip is checking your email in the morning is the fastest way to time travel to the afternoon. And today that might be checking Slack, or checking your phone, or pulling up any app that has an infinite scroll, whether that's TikTok or Facebook or Instagram. So time is a precious commodity. It's the one thing you can't manufacture. And for me, it always came down to setting aside time to learn. And personally, for me, it was hard for me to be motivated to learn. It always has been, unless I knew it was a means to an end. So for me, that was a project, something I want to build. And so I work backwards from there. I have a goal of, there's this thing I want to have functioning by a date, and I work backwards to what do I need to know to do it? And then I work backwards from there to how much am I going to have to read or watch or play with? And I just put it on my calendar in pieces that don't feel daunting.
It's awesome. Jumping back into a few things from your personal journey, in your bio, it said that you hold a couple patents. It feels like badges and certifications and like having things you can put on your LinkedIn profile, matter, but you don't see a lot of, patents on those proverbial scorecards. I'm curious how those came about, and if that's something you would encourage for others.
I guess I don't know that I would encourage it, unless I think for me, patents would be something you would think about if you really do feel like you are creating something. In my case, it would be as software that is the secret sauce of a business. So a patent is one technique for kind of putting a stamp of ownership on this amazing thing you're trying to build. For me, the patent thing came up in the context of working for a large company. In my case, it was Intel. And everything we did as an engineer at Intel was revolved around processes that would protect intellectual property. And like most big companies, a lot of the work you do isn't valuable, but you don't always know that it's not going to be valuable when you're creating it. So we had engineering notebooks that were made with like Teflon paper that couldn't be torn, where the ink wouldn't smear, and we were encouraged to write everything down, diagrams and doodles, and even if it was a bad idea. So for me, that was always the practice from an early age. That was when I was newly out of college. And the patents came about because along the way, a couple of the things I was working on turned out to be an important part of some software that Intel was selling and or wanting to give away and license. And so I was very fortunate enough to kind of get to see how patents work from the perspective of an engineer who did a thing. Got to do it twice on two totally different pieces of technology, and it was a really fascinating process. But it takes a team. There were lawyers that read documents I gave them and interviewed me and wrote things up and gave it to me for review, and I had to realize it was really terrible and it was totally inaccurate, and they changed something that made the important thing be unimportant or the working thing be broken. And so it was a fascinating, fun project. I'm grateful I had the opportunity. But it's an expensive proposition, and a lot of the patents don't never turn into anything, that can be licensed or generate money. But
yeah. And then I wanted to ask, because again, going, back, starting at Fortran, like that's, it dates you and I a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
But what I find fascinating and I think is relatable is, some people get stuck, like they get really, pigeonholed in a technology or a language and really focused on it. And then suddenly that language isn't as relevant as it was 5 or 10 years ago. What advice do you have to developers, engineers that maybe are finding themselves in that pigeonholed rut and they need to kind of jump over to something else to advance their career?
For me, my advice would be to anybody, whether they're younger than me or not, is I think in my case, I'm a software developer. It's a good practice to always be learning a new language. So I've learned and forgotten a lot of programming languages in my day. Today, I'm in the process of learning a new to me language called Rust. I have a background in the C languages, so C, C++, C Sharp more recently. But I've played with a lot of languages that don't look like Rust. I've tinkered with F Sharp. I've done some Lisp programming. I've done a lot of assembly language programming back in the day. PowerShell is probably very frequently a tool in my toolbox that I pull out to do things that make my life easier or make other people's lives easier. So I think there's a lot of value in just learning a new language, even if you don't have a defined use for it. Maybe your day job, everything you're building is in Visual Basic or C Sharp, but go learn JavaScript, right? If at work you're using C Sharp and ASP.NET to build backend stuff, at home use Node and Express and JavaScript. I mean, whatever it is that you don't have an opportunity to use for your day job, go practice it. Go build games. Go build a toy. Go rebuild the thing you're doing in the language you have to use. Go rebuild it in another language as a mechanism for learning. I think that's probably the most valuable thing a software developer can do to keep their skills up, because it's hard to predict which language is going to be the big one. Yeah. When I learned JavaScript for the first time, it was a toy inside of Netscape Navigator. And at the time, this would have been 1992, we didn't know JavaScript was going to rule the world like it does today. But I'm glad I learned it back then.
Well, Mike, I could chat with you all day. This has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate all the learnings you've brought and the wisdom you've shared. We like to end these with just a little bit of fun, if you're game.
Okay.
You seem a little apprehensive.
I think so, without knowing what's coming.
Yeah, I don't either. My team gives me these questions. A few of them are consistent, but a few of these are new for you, so that's exciting. So these are just like short answer, just kind of see what comes to mind. If you could switch legs with any animal, which would it be?
Switch legs with an animal. Off the cuff, I'd probably say kangaroo. I like to trail run, and I think kangaroo legs would be helpful.
Okay. Favorite Premier League team?
I'm a fan of Liverpool.
Okay. Messi or Ronaldo?
Messi, for sure.
Okay. Most overpaid player?
Probably Ronaldo.
Did you watch Ted Lasso?
I did, and I will again.
Yeah, it's a good show. Favorite pizza topping?
Sausage.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a Air Force pilot.
Is there anything you're reading right now?
Really bad spy novels.
Was it Brad Thor?
No, not even. They're like the Brad Thor wannabes.
The wannabes.
Yeah.
Funny. Team cat or team dog?
Cat.
We haven't had a lot of team cats yet on the spotlight. If you were a flavor of ice cream, what flavor of ice cream would Mike Woodring be?
Mint chocolate chip.
I like that. In all your travels, what's the weirdest thing that you've ever eaten?
Tuna fish pizza in London.
Would you eat it again?
Not in a million years.
Yeah, interesting. Well, you survived.
Phew.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was great to catch up. It's been
Likewise.
a long time, but really appreciate the conversation. And we hope the audience has enjoyed this conversation with Mike Woodring. We'll put any links to relevant content and some of Mike's courses in the show notes. And we hope you'll join us again for a future episode of Pluralsight Spotlight. Thanks, everyone.